Welcome to another episode of Real Talk for Coaches, where we help coaches thrive personally and professionally. Today, we're going to dive into the crucial topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and its profound impact on the coaching industry. Now, we did talk about this in an earlier segment when we talked about trends. Please feel free to go and check that segment out. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Dawn Z. Davis Reid, certified professional coach, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host, Coach Will, who's joining me.
Hey, y'all. How y'all doing?
How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Awesome. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to really deep dive DEIB and coaching for this segment, and I can't wait to get into this topic. I know this is something that's important, especially for coaches. But before we really get into the nitty and the gritty, what's going on, Will?
Not a thing. Just here.
Just here? Just here?
Ready to get into it. I'm digging the glasses.
You digging my glasses?
Yes.
The clear glasses?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. My husband said if I buy one more pair of glasses, he gonna get me, y'all.
But these outlets make it so easy. They're so affordable. I'm not gonna say cheap. I would say
affordable.
Yeah.
Yes, and I am that type that I want a pair of glasses that match every outfit that I have. So, but thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm cool. One of the things I'm working on right now is besides this wonderful podcast is I'm preparing for my recertification for PCC.
Oh, okay.
And and I'm debating if I want to become MCC. That's going to be fun. So I'm on that journey, and I hope to bring that to a future podcast and talk about this experience, or maybe I might do some little clips here and there where people can hear about my journey on social media. But but other than that, I'm here with you. I'm here, aware, alive, happy to be alive, happy to be here, and
yeah.
So you ready to talk about this very deep topic? Deep topic.
Yeah, I am. I think I am. I think if I'm not, I think we're going to talk about it anyway.
I'm going to just kick you out.
Oh, okay. I mean,
I'm just kick you out now.
You're very violent.
I am. Violence is still an answer to me. I'm sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
So like diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Yeah.
It's the front line of everywhere out there now, especially with this new administration that is in, with a lot of the businesses and the companies rolling back, standing on, and it's standing on their stance nonetheless, whether or not they're going to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's some companies are silently doing it while others are doing it out loud. I feel like the ones that are doing it out loud are making us, I don't know if they're making a statement, but I think they're saying something without saying something per se. But as far, how do you feel like that will roll into the coaching world? Like, say if you get called to hypothetical situation, you yourself, you get called by one of these corporations and you find out that they have recently rolled back their DEI processes and things of that nature. How do you think that would that affect your decision to actually go and coach for them, or would you change the way you coach? Because I know some stuff we talked about earlier. We'll get. I'm gonna let you answer that first. I'm sorry.
No apology. As you say that, I want to tell people, I want to tell the listeners and the viewers, I absolutely felt the anxiousness in my body when you said it. I kid you not. I'm sitting there going, ooh, because it is a good question. And I do think that this is something that many coaches are going to have to reckon with for themselves. I think there's different nuances to this. I think there's one, what are you being called into the company to do, right?
Right.
So if I take out of my own, not putting my personal values in it at all, right? But you called me as a corporation to come do executive coaching or team coaching for your organization, right? If that's what you called me in to do, how I incorporate DEIB is different because it's a natural part of how I hold space for my client. This does not mean I'm here to dictate policy or to say anything contrary to what that company is doing.
Mm-hmm.
My goal as a coach is, you want me to coach? I'm holding space for whoever is in front of me. And I am going to be culturally responsive, and I'm going to be socially responsive to that person who's in front of me, because that is my ethical obligation as a professionally certified coach.
Okay. Okay.
But you raise a point that I think coaches are going to have to consider. Does the company align with your values? Now, this could pose a problem for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to weigh heavy on how I am able to execute my contract. Because from a personal perspective, to roll back on DEIB says a lot about that company or that organization and their culture. And it may pose a personal value conflict for me. So I would have to give it a lot of thought on, do I want to work for that particular company if they called me in? And that's a personal conversation that I think every coach is going to have to kind of have with themselves.
Mm-hmm. I know a long time ago, I worked for a lot of technical companies,
Mm-hmm.
but one company I worked for, I was going through training. And one of the things that the trainer said to us, he says, I'm not doing this, and these are verbatim his
Mm-hmm.
words. This is going back some years. He said, I'm not doing this because it's right. I'm doing it because I'm a professional. So, meaning he was kind of saying to us, he did not necessarily like, because it was a certain establishment, he didn't like what he had to do, but he did it because he was a professional.
And he was hired to do a job.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that may be a battle that people may have to
Mm-hmm.
look at when they're, going into this whole anti DEIB, world, when they're looking to different companies and things of that nature. Like, do you do it? Do you say, you know what, I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to intertwine it a different way?
And again, I think that that's for every individual coach and what
Mm-hmm.
you've been hired to do. And I guess from my personal perspective, again, putting myself, I've been asked to do this project. And to be honest with you, I personally don't want to be put in a position where I have to say, I don't like it, but I'm doing it because I was hired to do it.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, this is how I coach. This is how I train. And no matter where I am, I'm going to hold space for the individual. That's important to me. And so however you come to me is how I'm going to coach and train you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because for a coach, it's not pushing our agenda. That's what we're taught. That's what I teach. But we do have ethical standards that we have to abide by. And one of the ICF ethical standards is, we're part of a global community. We have to hold space and respect the global community in
Mm-hmm.
which we are providing services to. That's an ethical standard. That has nothing to do with my political views or my values from that lens. My role as a coach is, I'm here to service you.
Right.
If you say that you're part of the LGBTQ community, then I'm going to make sure I consider that as part of who you are. If you are telling me that you are feeling you're experiencing microaggressions, I'm going to show empathy to that. I'm not going to coach you and say, oh, it's probably all in your mind. You're not experiencing microaggressions, because then I would not be a good coach, because I'm not giving my clients psychological safety. So for me, as long as that contract does not hinder me from doing what's right by my client, I could do the work. But as soon as an organization says, well, we don't want you to mention uh, anything dealing with race or transgendered identity, or then I have a problem, because if my client brings it up, guess what? I'm going to hold space for empathy for what they brought up. I hope that made sense. I hope that answered.
Yep, it did.
So one of the things I want to step back with, because I think it's important to understand what DEIB is and what it's not. And I'm going to start from what it's not. We've seen in the media, we've seen in the executive orders, the erroneous belief that it's about quotas. We're only hiring people based upon their gender or their race or religion, and we're not basing it on merit. And that is not true. And I think if people just did a little bit of research, itty bit of research, they would see that that is not the spirit of DEIB. And if you look at the past, and even in the coaching industry, like the coaching industry is predominantly 68% white women. That is the primary demographic of coaches. And you can find that ICF does a bi-year, like every 2 years they do research and about the state of the industry and coaching, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And, 68% is white women. And one of the things that we looked at in the chapters is, how are we recruiting coaches to come in? And the same thing with me as a coach going through my training. It was very Eurocentric. And some of the scenarios presented or techniques in coaching presented didn't necessarily align with what happens from a cultural perspective. One example, when you're coaching someone, you could coach someone from Asia, India, Africa, right? And they may say things like, I have to see what my husband thinks, or I want to check in to see what my mother or my mother-in-law or my father thinks. From a westernized Eurocentric lens, that could be disrespectful insofar as how we coach. If we say something like, well, what makes you feel like you need to talk to them? Yeah. You are an adult. How can you make this decision on your own? That is culturally in conflict with that person.
Right. They want the input from other family members. Whereas a lot of times in preach, well, you can do this, you can make your own decisions.
Exactly.
You don't gotta ask nobody nothing.
Exactly. And there is an organization called the European Mentoring and Coaching, I think it's Consortium. I think I'm saying that right. EMCC. You can go look it up. And again, it is focused on a Eurocentric perspective of coaching. And there is nothing wrong with that. But we have to step back if we really want to apply DEIB appropriately, is understand that different cultures have different ways of understanding how we're going to communicate or what's important as far as a value. And a coach must, from the standpoint of our ethics and our practice, adjust to our client, because from a woman's perspective, someone part of the LGBTQ community, someone intersectioned, right? Where you could be someone who is neurodiverse, but also white, or neurodiverse and also Black. How you navigate the world is going to be different. So how you coach that person is going to be different. And that's what DEIB really does. It makes sure that we are being diverse as far as, is there representation of coaches, right? So again, I'm going to bring this back into the coaching area. Is there representation of coaches? Right now, it's 68% white women. But if you look at demographics in America in particular, it's about half and half women, half and half men. So that right there tells you there's not enough men in the coaching industry. And I'm using gender specifically because we tend to make that more palatable than talking about race and religion. So just using that dynamic, 68% of coaches are women. That is not representative of the population.
Right.
So shouldn't we try to recruit more men? And if we want to really own diversity in the coaching industry, doesn't it make sense that we target men to bring more men in to the coaching industry?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
That's diversity. That did not mean we're targeting any man or someone a man that did not have the appropriate training, right? Or you still have merit. It's still merit.
Yeah. Wasn't that you wasn't qualified to do
Yes.
the role? It's like, hey, we need more qualified men
Yes.
to do the role.
Exactly.
To give another viewpoint.
Exactly.
It doesn't take away from your qualifications.
Not in the least bit. Because a good organization, whether you're nonprofit, for-profit, don't care. A good organization and its leadership, if you're being spiteful to say, I'm just going to hire any old woman to say I made the quota.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hire any old Black person, Hispanic person, just to say I made the quota, then you're not really implementing DEIB. You're not. You're being spiteful because you almost, it seems like you want to see it fail.
Right.
Because if you just hire anybody...
You're setting yourself up for failure.
Exactly.
Just so you can say you met a quota.
Exactly.
When DEIB is not a quota.
It's not a quota.
It's not a quota.
It's not. And if you're hiring as a quota, then you're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So again, using gender in particular in the coaching industry, if we want more men, how are we recruiting men? What is the messaging, the marketing, the strategy? Right? If we want more BIPOC people, then how are we recruiting them? How are we putting coaching and talking about coaching in other markets, in other countries? That's diversity. We're looking to see how do we improve making sure the industry is representative. When we talk about equity, we are talking about how do we make sure everybody who's invited to the table have equal access to the food on the table. So for instance, it's a hard, look, I'm just going to be transparent. I've spent over $20,000 in my investments for building my brand and my coaching and my training and the yada, yada.
Right.
It's not cheap. And then every year you have to recertify. It's not cheap, right? And so how accessible is that for someone who maybe you don't have that type of income to enter into the field? Hence, they created the Ignite Foundation or the ICF Foundation, where they give out grants every year. Many chapters give out grants every year. That makes it equitable. You could be poor and white if you qualify because you don't make a certain income, and you can be male and white and poor. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be a coach, you apply, and guess what? There's a grant.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
That's equity. And I'm using this terminology because again, we think we whittle it down to race, and it's not.
I saw a quote that said, people pay attention to what they think DEI is. Mm-hmm. And you have a bunch of people that are announcing what they want DEI to be.
To be, yes.
Or what they want it to represent.
Yes.
So it's being pushed. What it actually is versus what is being pushed to be are two different things.
It's two different things.
And people could say a thing without saying a thing. And I think that is what they're doing a lot of. Just saying a thing without saying a thing. And people aren't necessarily using their brains to say, hey, how is this going to affect me? Because I think this is what it is. But no, that's not what it is.
And this impacts you. It impacts you because what DEIB does is it levels the playing field to make sure there's representation and people have equal access, which is what I just said about equity. Mm-hmm. And then when you talk about inclusion, how are we including people? Do you feel included as a coach? So this is where the chapters are very important. Chapters are extremely important because every chapter is representative of their local region. So if I went to South Korea, to that chapter in South Korea, it's going to be specific to South Korea. right?
Right.
If I go to Ghana's ICF chapter, it's going to be specific to Ghana. That makes perfect sense because
Right.
that's inclusion. We're making sure that we are representative of the local area.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still be white. Matter of fact, like I said before, I am planning to do a trip abroad to like get connected into emerging markets. I'm an American. I'm a Black American. When I go to the Thai chapter or the Korean chapter, they're not going to look like me.
Right.
And they're not supposed to. But the key is, are they going to make me feel included? Like I belong? Like you are part of ICF. You come over here. We want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. You're welcomed here, right? That's the inclusion and belonging piece, is that regardless of what chapter I go to, they're welcoming of me regardless that I'm an American, regardless that I'm female, regardless that I'm Black. They say, you come, you have 5 minutes to talk about the coaching that you're doing in America and how you see it benefiting us and how we can all learn from each other. That's DEIB.
Right.
And I think people don't get that. I wish we did. And so I know as we wrap up, one of the things that I want to make sure I mention is that as coaches, and as we said earlier, we are going to have to decide how we're going to want to approach a lot of this stuff. But I think it does mean we have to educate people on what DEIB means and what it means for coaches in particular. And again, it is not pressing anybody's agenda because, first of all, as we all know, the agenda is the client's. As a coach, it's not my agenda. Mm-hmm. Not my monkey, not my circus, not my dishes, not my sink.
I think what in the greater scheme of things is that you have to learn how to adapt.
Key.
You have to learn how to adapt. You and be inclusive. As I said in the earlier one of the earlier podcasts, is a good teacher, a good coach, a good thing will learn to be able to include everybody without somebody feeling left out.
Exactly.
And I think that's what coaches would have to learn how to do.
Flexibility, being adaptive, learning that it's not a one size fit all. And to organizations and to leaders, they also have to understand that coaching is not a one size fit all. And our responsibility as coaches is to adjust to our clients. We have to. So regardless of who's in front of us, we still need to hold space for empathy and what I call trauma-informed or life-informed questions and being culturally responsive and sensitive to those individuals. And that's where I stand on it.
You talked about equity.
Equity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the shoes and fence analogy. Would you like to get into that and explain a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh, shoes and fits.
If we have time,
I'm happy to, because one of the things I often say, and it's really funny, because part of my practice when I do the initial session is it is okay if I'm not your coach. Every client is not my client, and every coach is not going to be your coach. And I always use the analogy of shoes. Like, I used to be a high heels person back in the day, my little stilettos, right? But as I've gotten older, I had to adjust. Stilettos don't like me, even though I still love them. Now I'm a sneakers girl. Like, give me some sneakers, some walking shoes, I'm good to go. And every sneaker or walking shoe don't fit me. Like, I have a certain brand. Like, I like my Skechers. I'm not a plug. They didn't give me any payment for this. I'm just telling you my personal preference.
You're showing your age right there.
Shut up. You shut up. Right. I am telling my age. I like Skechers. And I always tell people that same analogy. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with having comfort and fit. And that is equity, is like, does this fit me? And to have enough coaches where you have variety, because we've invited variety to be in the industry. And so I love when a client can come to me and say, while I love you, Dr. Reid, I love you. However, I think I need something different, right? I love that I can call Coach Will and say, hey, coach, I got this client. Not a good fit for me, but they might be a good fit for you. I'm going to send them your way.
Okay.
Right? But if you don't have equity and diversity, how can you do that?
Right. Right.
So, yeah, that's my thoughts, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. All right.
So, I hope this was an informative session. I hope we gave you something to think about as a coach, as an organization, as a leader. Again, please tune in next week where we're going to have some more shenanigans, some more information. As always, we adore you. Thank you for listening. Follow us on social media and visit my website, reidready.com or drdawnreid.com for more information. We love you guys. Thank you so much for being here.